Tianbao Fu Yao Lu. Chapter 145. Holding the main street by force. Outside the city gates, the rebels' attacks were going strong. As night fell, thousands of oil canisters, like meteors shooting through the sky, were tossed into the city. The north of the city immediately turned into a sea of flames, and the rebel siege team kept climbing up the walls. Atai directed the troops to dump the kerosene down on them. "My wife's still in the city," Atai said. "You all do as you see fit. I have to go." "You mustn't leave," a soldier immediately shouted. "Don't go." "What? No way. You all are being serious." Atai was completely at a loss for words. Luoyang, the eastern capital, was such a large city, and with An Lushan having fought his way to its very foot, there was no commander to guard the city. Instead, they had him, a foreigner, directing them. What kind of a joke was this? As they were talking, a bronze beast-shaped siege engine filled with coals had been pushed forward, and the troops were beginning to slam it into the gates. The gates boomed loudly, and the soldiers swarmed forth, holding up the inner city gates with all their might. "What are we supposed to do?" "Hey! You! Atai!" Atai had never defended a city before, and he had no choice but to shout, "Hang in there! No matter what, you must hold the gates." At the same time, he thought, "This is really troublesome. This siege engine that I can send flying with a wave of my fan can actually be so troublesome." But this grand scene before him had caused him to gain a new understanding of the life and death of mortals, of their victory and defeat. Amidst the chaos, Morajin called, "Atai! Send me up." Atai immediately shouted, "Move aside." He turned and flipped his godly hurricane fan open, turning and fanning it at Morajin. A strong wind began to blow out of nowhere, and Morajin drew his bow and knocked an arrow as he was sent up high. The moment that he passed over the column of oil pouring off the city tower, he loosed his arrow. The first arrow hit the coupling that held the siege hammer dangling in the air, and one of the links snapped. Right after that, Morajin leapt into the air, and with a spin, he sent 3 more arrows shooting forth. With 3 shuas, all of the couplings holding the siege hammer in place on the elevated wooden platform broke, and the 3,000 jin heavy copper beast siege hammer crashed down with an earth-shaking thud. With a pang, it collapsed the wooden bridge that had been hastily erected outside the city gates. "Retreat!" Morajin shouted at Atai. "Zenji's come back." "Atai!" This was the best news that Atai had heard all day, amidst all the chaos, but the soldiers retreated backwards like an ebbing tide. "I'm not telling you all to retreat," Morajin yelled. "Bi Sichin is almost here. Stand your ground." Endless war cries echoed from outside the city gates, and the soldiers all went forward to loose arrows over the battlements, pouring boiling oil down below. A large group of the soldiers in the city finally arrived, only to hear Bi Sichin shouting loudly, "Guard the city gates with your very lives! We must not retreat." Both Morajin and Atai finally let out a breath of relief, and they had finally gotten a chance to escape. Atai hadn't heard him clearly, and he asked, "What did you say just now?" Morajin transformed into the Grey Wolf, and he turned his head and announced to Atai, "Get on, we're saved." Atai vaulted onto the Grey Wolf's back, and the Grey Wolf specially picked out alleyways without any people in them as they sped back to the exorcism department. Hung Jun and Lu Su stood outside the main entrance to the exorcism department, watching the on-fire Luoyang exorcism department burning merrily away. Hung Jun. Lu Su. Thankfully it was the Luoyang exorcism department, which they hadn't stayed in for very long. If it were the Chang'an exorcism department that they saw as home burning like this, the two of them would have torn out of the city and gone head-to-head with An Lushan for that. Hung Jun had his 4 throwing knives with him, each of them imbued with one of the 4 attributes: lightning, fire, water, and rain. However, the main purpose of the immortal slaying throwing knives was to defeat Yao, and its effect was greatly weakened when applied to putting out the fire. Hung Jun pinned one of the throwing knives in the center of the records hall, and an icy chill protected the library, which held a large number of records. The two wings and the main hall, however, were already beginning to burn furiously. Wenbin and Xiangyu had lived here the longest, and they were the most emotional. After putting the entire yard's worth of peonies onto the wooden pushcart, he ran around in all directions, trying to put out the flames. "Stop trying to put the fires out," Xiangyu said. "If it's going to burn, then let it." Midwinter was just around the corner, and the north wind began to blow. With the help of the wind, the fires had quickly spread through the entire street, and all of Luoyang began to burn. With an army surrounding the city, however, who still had the time to put out any fires? The citizens were already busy snatching up their belongings, wailing and crying as they tried to find a way to escape the city. Where are Jinglong and Zhenge? Hung Jun wondered why they still hadn't returned yet. Lu Su, however, was not worried about the two of them, and with a quick shake, he transformed into the white deer, gesturing for Hung Jun to come along and take a look. At the same time, outside the city, the large army's encampment. En Lushan's troops had been split into two batches. The first group, the mortals, were acting as the vanguard, but it was the group in the rear that was the main force, the army of Yaoguai. All of the Yaoguai commanders found that watching the mortals fight a war was a very novel opportunity. "So much food is being wasted," the painted-skinned female, Liang Danhuo, said. "Tearing each other apart just like that makes it difficult for me to even strip them of their skin. Milord has promised that he'll leave some in the city for us," a bear Yao named Zhuang replied. This bear Yao was the one that the Carpiao had invited in at the beginning. As En Lushan's troops headed south, Zhuang went around everywhere, conquering cities left and right. One swipe of his bear paw could kill a man, and he had accomplished great deeds in battle and had frightened the wits out of the city guards of several large cities, thus ensuring that they won without a fight. Those actions of his had not gone unappreciated by En Lushan, and he had granted him the name En Luzhuang, along with the honor of being promoted to a commander at the same level as Liang Danhuo and the other Yao. To their side was another martial commander, tall and lanky, his eyes shining brightly, his pupils a golden yellow. His name was Zhao Yun, and after he watched the siege go on for a bit, he said, "Without us needing to do anything, this city is already done for." Liang Danhuo replied, "Don't rejoice too early. There are still exorcists in the city. Let's disperse," En Luzhuang said. "Looks like we won't have a chance to take the field today." Liang Danhuo set up a watch order for the Yaoguai, and the group of Yao then dispersed. Zhao Yun passed through the camp, and upon entering his tent, let out an oath and said, "This is really tiring." He then went on his own to draw up some water for a bath. He undid his black armor, took off his armored boots, and knelt down in front of his tent, lifting up the bucket and pouring it over his body. He then pulled out a towel and pulled it back and forth across his back to wipe it. His back and legs were covered with snake scales. How'd it go? How'd it do? When the Carpiao heard the sounds of water, it hurriedly pattered out, picking up a metal brush to scrub Zhao Yun's back for it. When the wires of the brush scrubbed over the scales, they let out little clinking sounds. "I saw him," Zhao Yun said, turning his head back. "The little peacock, he didn't know how to swim." "Is he all right?" the Carpiao asked worriedly. Zhao Yun replied, "He didn't drown, because I brought him to shore." "Scrub my legs for me, yes, and my butt, no, don't touch me there." The Carpiao had accidentally swiped Zhao Yun's important bits, and Zhao Yun immediately yelped, covering his crotch and falling to the ground. The Carpiao hurriedly said, "Your thing's so long it's almost touching the ground, I thought it was your leg." Zhao Yun. It took a long while for Zhao Yun to recover, and he said to the Carpiao, "I finally understand why they kicked you out." The Carpiao gripped the wire brush, not making a sound for a long time. Evidently, Zhao Yun had hit upon a sore point, and upon realizing that he had misspoke, added, "Oh well. After you enter the city, you'll be able to see him." "Did he ask about me?" the Carpiao asked pitifully. "He didn't." Zhao Yun whistled as he continued to scrub himself off. The Carpiao then asked, "When are we attacking the city?" "Soon, probably," Zhao Yun replied. "When we arrived just before this, I saw that the humans had already sent out their entire army, and the city had almost fallen. Once Lord Mara arrives, everyone will enter." Just as he was bathing, a Yaogui came over with a summons. "Lord Zhao Yun, General Liang requests your presence." "She wants me to stand guard as she sleeps once again," Zhao Yun said, throwing the towel aside. "Will she ever be done? I stood guard just this morning, why doesn't she go ask that bear?" "Hurry there, Ba," the Carpiao said. "She is a lonely girl." Zhao Yun tossed the Carpiao to the side, saying, "You go keep her company for a bit, until I finish my bath. Tell her to come over here of her own accord, and once I am clean I'll be waiting for her in bed." The Carpiao had no choice but to go pass on the message. As it dashed across the camp, it suddenly heard the sounds of thousands of men and horses charging at each other on the front lines, and the ground itself began to quake. There was a din from behind, of drums and gongs, and it was very lively, and Lushan had probably arrived. With that, it dashed up high, looking towards Luoyang. The gates of Luoyang stood wide open, as the defenders of the city finally led their men out, charging right for Lushan's rebels in a head-on slaughter. The sky was dark, and the world quivered as the almost 200,000 people on both sides killed each other outside the city of Luoyang until their blood ran like a river. The city was slowly emptying, and Hung Jun, riding the white deer, looked around across the rooftops, shouting, "Li Jinglong! Mo Rijin!" Scattered residents passed by and happened to see Hung Jun riding the glowing white deer. That sight was very startling, and they all shouted, "An immortal has descended to this mortal realm! An immortal has descended to this mortal realm!" The white deer. Hung Jun said, "It would be great if I were really an immortal who could save the suffering." Infants wailed, houses collapsed, and horror engulfed the entire city. Burning cans of oil kept flying into the city in twos and threes, and all of the citizens who were fleeing the city, upon seeing this handsome youth riding the auspicious symbol of a celestial deer that represented peace, immediately acted as if they had seen hope, and they all raced behind them. The white deer was about to leap into the sky and fly away, but Hung Jun said uneasily, "Let's go down there. Don't let them misunderstand. Do you want to save them?" The white deer turned into a small alleyway, and with a quick shake, turned into Lu Su. He and Hung Jun stepped up onto the wall, and they vaulted into an unused house. Hung Jun asked, "How can we save them?" "Jinglong told me not to use magic to interfere with the battle. Unless the Yao tribes come fighting their way in, we exorcists cannot fight." The infant's wails grew louder and louder, and Hung Jun looked around, finally discovering the infant in the cradle on the second floor. He picked him up, and he and Lu Su vaulted out the window. They passed by several other residences, but a can of oil came flying by through them, and with a huge boom, the residences began to burn. Hung Jun and Lu Su dropped and rolled at the same time as they leaped out. "What should we do with this child?" Hung Jun asked. That infant in swaddling clothes was not yet a year of age, and he would not stop wailing. Lu Su gestured for Hung Jun to hold him as he formed a seal with his right hand, and he pulled open the cloth with his left, pressing down gently against that infant's chest. With a weng, the seal landed over his heart, forming a burning hot stamp. The infant immediately stopped crying, and he shut his eyes, falling soundly asleep. Hung Jun said, "You handled it in the end." "Hand him over to an adult," Lu Su said. "There's no way for us to take him with us, you don't have any milk for him to drink." "Hung Jun, but there's to Raindak Sayazai." She'll only have milk if she gives birth. Lu Su was torn between crying and laughing. You don't even understand this. But how would you know? The two of them argued as they passed through a small alleyway, only to see more citizens running out with their families in tow. There was a woman leading a child by the hand, shouting loudly, "My child, my child." Hung Jun held the infant out to her, and the woman immediately rushed forward, crying and shouting, "Thank you, Lord Benefactor. Thank you." The woman untied the swaddling clothes and checked the dudu, confirming that it was her child. She then moved to kowtow again, but Lu Su and Hung Jun had no effort to spare for that, and they had long since run off. Li Jinglong. Hung Jun was already completely turned around. Though he had come to Luoyang once before, they were surrounded by fire, and the sky was dark, so he couldn't tell which direction was which at all. Lu Su shouted, "We have to run towards the main streets. They're probably all at the northern gate." But just as they finished speaking, there was another huge boom in the distance. What came flying into the city this time were countless huge boulders, and they seemed to have collapsed something under their weight. The two of them charged out into a main street, only to hear someone shout, "The city's fallen, run quickly, run." "No way!" Hung Jun exclaimed. The northern gates to Luoyang fell just like that, and the main street was flooded with a stampede of citizens, all of them trampling over each other. Lu Su and Hung Jun leapt up onto the rooftops and dashed across. They were close to the northern gates, and from there, they could see the infaction of rebels actually starting to pour in like carp flooding a river. Almost 10,000 rebels, with spears in hand, started to stab at whoever they saw, and the citizens who could not escape were all pinned to the ground by a poliarm, the blood they shed forming a river. Hung Jun could not stop trembling, but Lu Su took Hung Jun's hand and said, "Don't act rashly. We have to find the others first." Lu Su had stayed in Liangzhou for many years, and the foreign tribes of Siwai often raided the villages there. He had seen scenes much crueler than this. Hung Jun could not stop gasping for breath, and he could not stand by and idly watch for any longer. He let out an enraged bellow and picked up the roof beam of a house that had snapped, before leaping into the main street. Lu Su shouted, "Hung Jun." Hung Jun was very physically strong to begin with, and he was also very agile and nimble. Though Li Jinglong's warning had been carved into him, that he could not use his magic to slaughter mortals, he felt his heart clench something fierce in that moment. In an impressive display of his martial arts, he charged into the main street and swept the beam, immediately sending the leader of the rebels and his horse flying outwards, before they slammed into a brick wall. Upon seeing resistance, the men that followed behind all bent their bows and knocked arrows to the strings. Lu Su tore a plank off a door and streaked towards Hung Jun like a comet, and he waved that plank around to block, roaring, "Hung Jun! Let me help you!" Lu Su was enraged as well, and he pushed the plank aside, dropping to the ground and rolling. He successfully picked up the bow and quiver that had fallen to the ground, before leaping up onto another roof across the street, drawing his bow and putting an arrow to the string. Hung Jun waved the roof beam about a jong in length and 2 people's arm lengths in width, once again blocking the arrow shafts that came shooting at him. "We're going to be scolded," Hung Jun said. "Then let them scold us," Lu Su shouted, before he drew his bow, drew an arrow, loosed it, drew another arrow, and loosed it. None of his arrows were shot in vain, and every one that he aimed for, he hit. Hung Jun stood the roof beam up on one end and brought it crashing down on the cavalry that came charging forward. Wherever the roof beam swept, the cavalry either were immediately knocked unconscious or dead, or sent flying backwards. With the two of them working together, they actually managed to defend the entirety of the main street. That roof beam was especially ferocious of a weapon in Hung Jun's hands, and the riders had no way to get close to him. But not long after, Lu Su's quiver was empty of arrows, and he had no choice but to shout at Hung Jun, "I'm out of arrows. Let's retreat." Outside the city gates, even more rebel soldiers were pouring in, and Hung Jun had no choice but to shout, "No, we can't. They're going to get into the city and kill people." Lu Su originally thought, this is a battle, how could the enemy not kill people? But Hung Jun's words were like the clang of a bell, and they resounded through his heart. He had grown accustomed to seeing fresh blood and slaughter, but in this moment, in front of Hung Jun, that callousness was as thin as a sheet of paper, and Hung Jun's rage tore it to shreds. "Do you know what you look like?" "What?" Hung Jun's face was streaked with blood, but he continued to keep his guard up doggedly. "You're like that monkey from the novels." Lu Su turned and spun through the air, lifting the tiles off the roofs. They flew out in all directions like a storm of meteorites, each of them striking the rebels that came flooding endlessly forth. Hung Jun couldn't make head nor tail of that, and he paused for a brief moment. He didn't understand that Lu Su was comparing him to the monkey Yao that appeared in the novels that the common folk liked to read, the one that went with Master Xianzang to the Western Paradise to retrieve the scriptures, who went around fighting everything, unafraid of anything in the world as long as he had his fun. End chapter. Tianbao Fu Yao Lu. Chapter 146. Battle to the death. In that instant, even more soldiers flooded in from the north, and they had begun their charge. In the brief silence, Lu Su's eyes widened. Almost all of those cavalry members were carrying horse spikes, and they came charging towards them. Hung Jun thought that they would be unable to hold out against that, but just as he was about to dismount to help, a bell clanged, and the enemies began to charge ahead along the main street. Hung Jun gathered his strength, but just as he was about to fight them to the death, thousands of horses rushed by behind him, shaking the very earth itself as they went. Tang reinforcements from who knows where had, at the same time, begun to charge towards the main street. The vast main street of Luoyang was like a river, and the two armies, like two floods, came crashing down on each other. War cries drowned out all other screams and shouts. When Hung Jun turned to look back, the world was dark and gloomy, but the commander at the head of the army held a long spear in his left hand, while he reached out towards Hung Jun with his right. In the blink of an eye, their outstretched hands met, and Hung Jun leaped up onto the horse. Li Jinglong roared, "Hang on tight! Charge!" Thousands of mounted Tang troops raised their spears at the same time, clashing fiercely with the rebels. Lu Su simply felt a tug at his collar as the grey wolf instantly grabbed him in its jaw. With a leap, the grey wolf leapt over the rooftops, while at the same time tossing Lu Su upwards. Lu Su spun through the air, only for Atai, on the grey wolf's back, to reach a hand out and tug him back down. "Atai, where's your Saizai?" "Don't know." Lu Su shouted back. Li Jinglong brought Hung Jun along as he swept his spear around. With this charge from the Tang troops, the riders and horses in the front on both sides toppled. Most of the Tang troops, however, were ready for this, and with their glaives in hand, they came charging back. Not far behind them, there came a whistle. When Hung Jun turned to look back, Ashinakayang stood there in the armor of the Tang army, guarding Li Jinglong's back. The northern city gates had already collapsed, and the rebels were only growing in number. Li Jinglong shouted, "Don't use magic. Don't pay attention to anything else. Just come with me." The Tang troops dwindled in number as the battle went on, and they could hold out no longer. Lu Su, Morajin, and Atai were spread out in a straight line as they stood on the rooftop. Lu Su and Morajin swiftly loosed arrow after arrow, while Atai chucked roof tiles downwards. Morajin bellowed, "Atai! It's not like I know how to shoot arrows." Atai protested. "Plus, we can't use magic. How else do you want me to help? Just stand right there. Don't toss roof tiles." Lu Su shouted. "If you throw all the roof tiles, what will I stand on?" The main street had turned into a giant meat grinder. Both the Tang troops and the rebels were pouring endlessly into it, and it was hard to say how many lost their lives there as blood and flesh went flying through the air. The rebels had sworn to invade Luoyang, while the Tang troops were putting everything on the line to drive them out of the city. This was the first time that Hung Jun was seeing Li Jinglong step into battle in full armor. Back in Dunhuang, even when they were fighting against the corpse Ghost King, he had only seen him leading the troops in a charge from a distance. This time, he was sitting right behind him on the horse, witnessing with his own eyes what Li Jinglong looked like as he cut his way through the enemies. Both of them were splattered with blood, and Li Jinglong, with his spear in hand, was forcefully carving out a bloody path. Countless rebels came rushing at him, only for him to cut them down as soon as they showed their faces. "We can't hold out any longer," Ashinakayan shouted. "Zenchi! Marquis! We fight to the death," a Tang soldier shouted. "Fight to the death," all of the Tang troops bellowed. Li Jinglong shouted back, "Fight to the death. If we are to die, we will all die together." Hung Jun turned around to look, only to see that the number of Tang troops dwindled as the battle went on, but the rebels were as numerous as ever, and they were continuing to pour into the city without end. The Tang soldiers were like moths to the flame. Over 1,000 had charged into the fray, but now there were only a few hundred left. As their numbers fell, they too fell ever more quickly. Ashinakayan shouted, "Hung Jun! Knock him unconscious. Then get him away from here." Without responding to them, Li Jinglong let out another loud shout as he fought his way into the shield formation that the foot soldiers had raised. The rebels were already beginning to close in around them. They first spread out from the entrance to both sides, and they were climbing up onto the rooftops, shooting arrows down into the center. "We can't fight like this any longer," Mo Rijin yelled. "Let's go." The horse that Li Jinglong was riding had been shot by an arrow, and its front legs weakened as it sank to its knees. Hung Jun hurriedly somersaulted off the horse's back, dragging Li Jinglong along as he leapt off. The exorcists each leapt down. The Tang soldiers' war horses had basically all been cut down, and each of them were covered in blood, their hair in disarray, as they held their long blades in hand, gathering together in one spot. The rebel foot soldiers crowded around them from all sides, but they did not charge forward. Instead, they raised their shields, and riders appeared behind the shield formation, raising their spears in preparation for a charge. The rebels had taken over the entirety of the main street, and with some 3,000 people, they had trapped the exorcists and the 100 or so Tang soldiers in their center. Everything fell silent, so silent that a pin dropping to the ground to be heard. Only the black clouds in the sky billowed. A commander rode his horse into the city, appearing out of the ranks. He asked, "Who is the defender of the city?" Bi Sichen was riding atop his horse, his face sheet white, following behind that commander. "The Marquis of Yadan, Li Jinglong." "Who comes?" Li Jinglong had a saber in his hands, and around him were gathered the Tang soldiers as well as his subordinates in the exorcism department. "Daxi Sun," that commander replied solemnly. "Marquis of Yadan, surrender. You cannot hold the city." "Bi Sichen," Li Jinglong said, "you take the salary of the Great Tang and hold the position of defender of Luoyang for the Great Tang, yet you have gone out of the city and surrendered to the enemy. Do you think that I won't strike you down right here and now?" Bi Sichen could not stop trembling, and he couldn't even stutter out a single word. The one who had led his troops in a charge out of the city had been him, because he had been hoping to soundly rout the rebels, but he had also been the one to be captured as a prisoner of war after he got hit by an arrow and fell off his horse. As of now, the rebels had brought Bi Sichen with them as they besieged the city, which filled Li Jinglong with a burning rage. "I will count to 3. Daxi Sun was a general who had surrendered as well, and he had done so a long time ago, when An Lushan was gathering his troops to head south. His tenure in the army had been much longer than Li Jinglong's, and he was not afraid of this youngster. He said coldly, 1. As the one was spoken, almost 100 of the Tang troops all took off their helmets and tossed them to the ground, all of them moving as one as they drew their sabers, each of them placing it against their own necks. This was the first time that the members of the exorcism department were witnessing such a cruel scene. 100 emotions swelled in Hung Jun's heart. This great Tang, where there were people who surrendered after one battle, who were inferior to even dogs, where there were also people who were willing to lay down their very lives as long as they had one battle in which they could repay their debt to their families and country. Li Jinglong was silent. 2. Daxi Sun continued. Hung Jun stood by Li Jinglong's side. Both of them were slightly hunched over, and it was at this very instant that Hung Jun suddenly felt the handle of a throwing knife stuffed into his hand. Ashinakayan had handed him one of his throwing knives. "Kill him," Lu Su said quietly. "It's up to you two now." Hung Jun's immortal slaying throwing knives were imbued with magic, so he had no way to use them. Ashinakayan's, however, were not. Cavalry of the divine capital of Luoyang. "Heed my orders," Li Jinglong called. "Today, we may suffer 1,000 humiliations, and tens of thousands of instances of helplessness, but our country is in dire straits. It does not wish for its valiant warriors to give up their lives, but rather for us to live on in ignoble circumstances, so that we may redeem ourselves one day." The Tang troops all breathed heavily. Li Jinglong pulled out his sword of wisdom and breathed in deeply. 3. Retreat. Li Jinglong's lips moved as he spat out that word. Instantly, Hung Jun and Atai lifted their hands at the same time. Hung Jun threw his throwing knife with a forehand grip, and his wrist was level with his shoulders as he splayed his fingers forward. The handle of the knife was pinched between his fingers, and it spun twice as it left his hand. Ashinakayan, on the other hand, threw with his backhand, the blade of the knife tucked between his index and middle finger. His arm traveled upwards from his waist, and with a flash of silver light, the knife left his hand. One forehand and one backhand, one yin and one yang, the two of them working together like this was a masterpiece in the making. The throwing knife that left Hung Jun's hands was as quick as a flash of lightning, while Ashinakayan's flew forward like a bird, the knives heading for Daxi Sun and Bi Sichen. Li Jinglong had just given the order to retreat when the two surrendered generals saw a white light flash in front of their eyes. The throwing knife heading for Daxi Sun slit his artery, and with a shua, fresh blood sprayed across the heads of the soldiers surrounding him. The throwing knife heading for Bi Sichen pinned him through the throat, and his shout of charge died in his throat as he plummeted off his horse. There was an uproar amongst the soldiers, and Li Jinglong took this chance to shout, "Break through their formation." Both sides were waiting for their commanders to give the order, but the rebels were slow by a mere half a second. The morale of the Tang soldiers rose to a peak, and they all turned and started to hack and slash their way out. The members of the exorcism department led the way in carving out a clear path, ripping an opening in the encirclement with as much effort as it would take to blow some dust away. Under Li Jinglong's command, they charged towards an alleyway situated at one end of the main street. It was also then that the enemy's arrows came at them in a dense wave, and their surroundings were filled with fighting and slaughter. "Run!" Li Jinglong shouted. He wrapped one hand tightly around Hung Jun's wrist, to prevent the rebels from separating the two of them. With his other hand, he hacked and slashed. Hung Jun was fleeing hastily, and he was afraid of harming people on their side in the chaos, so he didn't dare to try anything rash. "Raise the pentacolor sacred light!" Li Jinglong shouted. "Didn't you say I couldn't use it?" Hung Jun asked. "It doesn't matter when we're running," Li Jinglong yelled. The pentacolor sacred light rose from the ground, and the pressure immediately decreased. Though the remnants of their soldiers had already lost the battle, they were not panicked at all. They followed Li Jinglong through the little alleyway, instantly leaving their pursuers behind as they wove through the streets, rushing towards the east of the city. Along the way, there were residents trying to flee, as well as scattered troops that had swarmed into the city, so they fought and rescued their way through as they dashed towards the Tianjin bridge. "Come with me, come with me!" Li Jinglong roared. But just as they dashed out of the small alleyways, more scattered rebel troops charged towards them. They were unprepared, so they had no choice but to pull out their weapons, hurriedly blocking the strikes that came for them. Arrows flew this way and that, and with a shake of the pentacolor sacred light, Hung Jun helped Atai block them. "Hai mi ho bai," Atai shouted towards Hung Jun in the midst of his bustling around. "Hung Jun diddy. Where's your dagger?" Hung Jun shouted towards Atai. "Use your dagger. It's with the pretty one." With an arrow step, Atai ducked behind Hung Jun and Li Jinglong. "You have to learn to use a weapon," Li Jinglong shouted, even as he multitasked, killing the enemies in front of him while protecting the citizens behind. Atai replied, "I had a knight to begin with." "Who told you that high priests have to learn a weapon as well? And where's your knight?" Morajin asked. "Over here." Atai pulled Ashinakayang over, using him as a shield to block the attacks coming from the front. Ashinakayang had no other choice but to pull out his curved blade and shout, "It's you all or me today." With every knife that Ashinakayang threw, he had one less. Two had already been thrown earlier, and now, since he had to keep them to save his own skin, he didn't dare to throw them wildly around. He had no choice but to use his ground rolling technique, which was specially designed to cut away at horses' legs. Morajin and Lusu dashed over, non-stop firing arrows behind him. When the scattered rebels fell back, Li Jinglong then led the group of people, as well as the citizens, over the bridge. But as soon as they made it over the bridge, another group of people charged forwards. Those were the elderly, the children, and the women of Luoyang. They waved around washboards, raised rolling pins up high, and held clothesline poles at the ready as they let out a shout in unison and charged towards them. The person leading the charge had eyes that bulged with rage, and she lifted her long whip, that was Turanduct. "We're on your side," Li Jinglong hurriedly shouted as soon as he saw Turanduct. Turanduct had originally been buying some braised food in the market, but upon seeing that the merchants who had fled into Luoyang were currently selling off their cloth at low prices, she spent some more time browsing the different fabrics and powders. She hadn't thought that as she was shopping, the city would actually fall, and she had no choice but to escort the elderly and the children of the city as they fled the market and eventually out of the city. Turanduct went forward and grabbed Atai's ear, ready to give him an earful. She shouted, "You call this defending the city? Honored grandmother, I was wrong." Atai hurriedly begged for mercy. "It wasn't his fault," Li Jinglong hurried to add. "Everyone, come with me. Quickly. They're going to come again in a bit." Li Jinglong went down the bank of the river that ran along the main street and slid down. "Get in." That just so happened to be in the Tenli of the heavenly river that they had visited once upon a time. The exorcists stood guard outside this ancient riverbed, while the citizens retreated in twos and threes. A good half a shishan later, the almost 1,000 people had gone in. Li Jinglong left some Tang troops out front to stand guard, while he, Hung Jun, and the rest headed inside. In the land that had once been filled with earthly splendors, everyone who resided here had all fled, leaving behind a few scattered stars of dim oil lamps in the vastness of the riverbed. The tents of the people from the western regions had been tossed to the ground, and crates and boxes were scattered all around. Powder covered the ground. The citizens had their families with them, and when they entered this place, they slowly quieted. All of them, without a single exception, whether they stood or sat, were all watching Li Jinglong. "The city of Luoyang has fallen," Li Jinglong said, taking off his helmet. "Patriarchs and honored elders, we cannot leave yet. We must live and die with the city. You all should find ways to save your own skins." And saying that, he tossed his helmet to the ground, where it clanged. That sound seemed to have undone some prohibition, and sounds of crying instantly spread through the crowd, echoing through the dark underground. Bi Sichen and Dak Si Sun had surrendered to the enemy. Almost 20,000 Luoyang soldiers had become vengeful spirits of the battlefield, and the eastern capital of the old days had been gutted by fire. Hung Jun walked out of the Tenli of the heavenly river, looking up towards the sky. A light rain had begun to fall from the dark heavens, and it carried with it the odor of blood. From somewhere came the wild barking of dogs. "You're back," Tu Rainduk said, coming to a stop behind Hung Jun. "We're back," Hung Jun said. "That's great," Tu Rainduk said. "Everyone is still alive." Hung Jun's eyes were red as he turned around, meeting Tu Rainduk in an embrace. When they had lived in the amber of Lanling in the past, though Tu Rainduk was about the same age as Hung Jun, she had been the big sister of the group, and had taken good care of them down to the smallest detail. When he saw her again, he suddenly felt as if an age had passed since then. A Tai came over as well and stroked Hung Jun's head. Over on the other side, Li Jinglong had assigned the remaining Tang soldiers a mission, to protect the citizens as they fled out the exit on the other end of the Tenli of the Heavenly River, through the dried riverbed. "After you see the reservoir, turn to the southeast," Li Jinglong explained to the gathered soldiers. "When the first of you exit, you must be careful. That place is close to the southern city gates, which they should have yet to conquer. Hurry, and you will still make it in time." The Tang troops were all silent, as if not a single one of them wanted to go. "Go," Li Jinglong said. "This is an order." "How about you, sir?" a Tang soldier asked. "From now on, this is no longer your battlefield," Li Jinglong said. He was afraid that these Tang troops would still lay down their lives, so he added, "Escort them to Chang'an." But when he got to that point, he suddenly realized that if they were to set foot in Chang'an city, they would definitely be beheaded, as per military law, so he changed what he was saying. "To the outskirts of Chang'an city, and let the citizens go into the city, while you all wait at the foot of Mount Li for me. When that time comes, I will have more orders for you." The Tang troops all moved out at that. They helped the citizens along, or forcibly picked them up, as they got them to leave as fast as they could. Otherwise, as soon as the city fell under the complete control of the rebels, the entirety of Luoyang would be sealed, and it would be difficult for them to flee. End chapter.